Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're checking out the easiest, most powerful one-bar setup for the Magicka Necromancer in the Elder Scrolls Online. This build is going to be fantastic for solo content and even for group content with no trials gear and no mythics required to get started. This is basically the most simple you can get on the Magicka Necromancer while still tearing through enemies with brutal dots and a simple, easy-to-manage rotation with 0 bar swapping. And did I mention no blastbones to worry about? Yes, this is a pure dot build for the Necromancer, one of my favorite ways to play, so let's jump right into the video. Alright everybody, we are back with an update to our Magicka Necromancer. Powerful one-bar setup for solo and group content. Now updated for the High Isle chapter. More powerful than ever with a lot more damage survivability, plus some different options for gear sets. So let's go ahead and jump right into things, talk about the buff stats. Taking a look at our character sheet first, we're sitting at about 33k max Magicka, 25k max health, 13k max stamina. Recoveries do go up with our summons active, keep that in mind on the Necromancer class. Sitting at about 1500 Magicka recovery, which is more than enough on this setup. 4k spell damage, 60% spell critical, and this is the non-mythic version of this setup. Your stats can get much, much higher. Now, this is a Magicka-focused Necro, so 64 points into max Magicka as our attributes. We are going to want the max health and max Magicka food, so blue quality food for that one. And then I do recommend the Thief Mundus to maximize that critical chance. Now, in terms of the race, you have plenty of good options for running a Magicka Necromancer, whether you're playing group, solo content. I like High Elf. High Elf just gives me some good sustain, a little bit of extra damage reduction while channeling. That's actually going to be a big part of this build. And then, of course, we get the 2000 max Magicka and 258 spell damage. Those are our main offensive stats. So you want something that has Magicka and spell damage. Other good options for that would be obviously Dark Elf. You'd get a little bit extra stamina in that case, which would actually be pretty good. I think Khajiit would be a nice option for this build as well, since we are playing off critical chance and crit damage, which we'll see in our sets and our skills in just a couple of minutes. So yeah, High Elf, Dark Elf, Khajiit, those would be probably my top 3. Of course, you can make anything work in the Elder Scrolls Online. It's not a huge difference overall, depending on which race you pick. Now, finally, for consumables, you might have caught that I'm using spell power potions. That's definitely needed on the one-bar setup, just to make sure you have those important spell damage and spell critical buffs. I would recommend that. If you are okay with 2 bars, then you can obviously slot things like Inner Light, Degeneration, and you can use basic Magicka potions. That'll be totally fine. So I think that covers the basics. Let's go ahead and talk about the gear sets next, see what has changed. So I have kept the DRAUGR set as the main 5-piece for this build. This is a great set for Necromancer for a couple reasons, but it is changing in the High Isle chapter, so I want you to be aware of that. 2 through 4 piece bonuses are basically the same. You get max Magicka, offensive penetration, Magicka recovery, but the 5-piece bonus got an interesting change, and I know a lot of people are going to consider this to be a nerf. Depending on how you play, this could actually be a buff in many cases. So here's what it does now. It increases your damage done by 330, but reduces your healing taken by 10%. Now, this used to give a unique debuff. It used to increase your damage against a single target by about 660. So the buff was more powerful in the past, but in the High Isle chapter, keep in mind that this increases all of your damage. So all damage sources, single target, AoE, damage over time, light attack, heavy attack, anything you do on your Necromancer is going to get this buff. And the nice thing about Necros, and why I think this works really well on the Magicka Necro, is we have lots of dots, right? We can run damage over time skills that tick every second, and every dot tick is going to get that bonus. This also, like I said, applies to heavy attacks, as well as channeled lightning staff heavy attacks, which is what we're going to take advantage of on this build. So basically, every tick, every second of damage that we're doing, all our abilities are going to get buffed by this. I think it's pretty powerful when you have a purely dot-based build, which this is. Now, obviously, you do also reduce your healing taken by 10%. Remember, Necromancers also have increased healing done anytime they are affected by something negatively. So on the Necro, I feel like this evens out, and the extra damage now on all of your abilities against all targets, not just a single target, I think really makes up for it. So Pretty cool set. If you don't have it yet, I definitely would recommend that. The DRAUGR set, very nice on the Magicka Necromancer. So we are going to run 5 pieces of that. I just put it on the body. I think that's probably the easiest way to set it up. So you got the light chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet. Of course, all divines, if you can get those, and then max Magicka as the enchant. Now, the second set here I have updated as well. Used to run Mother Sorrow. You can still do that, completely viable. But in the High Isle chapter, you should definitely check out the Order's Wrath set. Now, I did a whole video on this. I'll have that linked in the description if you want to check it out. But I think this set is good enough where it can replace Mother Sorrow for some builds. Not all builds, but definitely some builds. And the nice thing about this too, as compared to Mother Sorrow, is it is 100% crafted. It only takes 3 traits to craft this, so it's easily customizable and fairly easy to get your hands on. Check out the stats though, they are very nice. You have critical chance, weapon and spell damage, 2 more critical chance bonuses, and then a buff to your critical damage and critical healing. So only slightly less critical chance than Mother Sorrow. You get bonuses to critical damage and critical healing, plus an extra spell damage bonus. So I think, you know, for a lot of builds, it's going to make sense to switch over to this. Of course, you don't have to. It's not a huge difference. But like I said, there are advantages to the Order's Wrath set since it is crafted. Now, I have crafted a lightning staff for this build. I'm using the precise trait. I think that makes the most sense for solo and group content. Using the shock damage enchant, that's going to be very important to proc off balance. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Off balance did get buffed in the High Isle chapter as well. Then we're just using 3 pieces of jewelry. So the Order's Wrath necklace and 2 rings. Got spell damage as the enchant on all of those, and then bloodthirsty as the trait. Now finally, for the monster set, I am using the classic Ice Heart on this build. Ice Heart gives us another critical chance bonus, which is going to be great. And then when we deal critical damage, which is all the time, we're going to proc that extra damage shield and the frost damage AoE. Keep in mind that is going to get buffed by our DRAUGR set as well. So you actually get pretty good damage per second from this monster set. If you don't have this, any, you know, sort of dot-based monster set is going to perform really well in combination with the DRAUGR set. Of course, the nice thing about this for solo play is you get the damage shield. You can see almost 6k damage absorbed every 6 seconds. That's going to be really nice for survivability. So for this, I have both pieces light armor, so the light helmet, light shoulders, divines as your trait, and then max Magicka as the enchant. So once again, just to go over it, we've got DRAUGR on the body pieces. We have Order's Wrath on the precise lightning staff and jewelry. Then, of course, Ice Heart as the monster set. Now, I know you may be curious about mythics on the 1-bar build for the High Isle chapter. I have been keeping tabs on one particular mythic, the Oaken Soul Ring, and this did get a nerf recently. So in my testing on the 1-bar Necromancer, at least, the difference between running this wasn't significant. I didn't see a ton more damage. What you do get with something like the Oaken Soul Ring versus running like a monster set is you get more stats. You can see you get about 4k extra health, Magicka, and stamina, which could be, you know, nice for survival. You will also get slightly better stats from the Major Courage buff. You'll also get better armor for running Major Resolve, and then the other things really aren't affected because we're using potions. So if you would like more stats specifically on your 1-bar build, you want to be a little bit more survivable and be able to take some more hits, have better armor, have better health, then yeah, you can check out this Oaken Soul Ring. It's pretty powerful still. But in terms of like overall damage, I didn't see any difference between running this and then just running my Order's Wrath set with the Ice Heart monster set. Remember, Ice Heart, being able to run this also gives us a damage shield, plus a lot of extra DPS, since we have the AoE dot, and that gets buffed by DRAUGR. So again, not a huge difference in damage, but you can run Oaken Soul for some improved stats overall. So definitely an option you might want to consider if you have access to mythics. So that covers the basics. Let's go ahead and talk about the skills next. I have sort of simplified this for the High Isle chapter, and this works really well, you guys. Remember, our focus on this particular setup is dot damage. I basically have 4 big damage over time effects, an ultimate that is also a dot, and then 1 heal, basically, and that's all you need to make this very powerful setup. So our first ability is going to be Blockade of Storms. That comes from the Destruction Staff skill line. That's your second ability here. Take the Elemental Blockade morph because you want the extra duration. So I've tried to make the durations on the dots here as long as possible, between like 14 to 16 seconds. So it's very easy to maintain this rotation and throw in a lot of heavy attacks. Heavy attack Lightning Staff with off balance and our champion points. It's going to add a lot of damage to this build as well. But this is just great for AoE damage over time. It's also going to proc the off balance status effect more frequently because we do have that shock enchant, remember, on our Lightning Staff. So very good for damage. Next up, we're going to add some Necromancer abilities, starting with Skeletal Arcanist. And this is replacing really Stalking Blastbones from the Gravelord skill line. So Skeletal Arcanist, that's your fourth ability here. I like this better than Blastbones because I don't really have to babysit and recast Blastbones all the time. You can just lay this down. You can see it has a 16-second duration. It attacks the closest enemy, but then deals shock damage to all other nearby enemies as well. You also, of course, get really good passives, Necromancer passives from using this. So it's great. I definitely recommend that since we are taking, the more dot-focused approach on this setup. Next up, we got Barb Trap, another nice dot. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. That's our last ability here. This is going to be single target, so it's going to be a little bit better for like bosses and things like that, where you don't have tons of AoE and adds to worry about. But the other nice thing too, while you want to use this all the time, is the Minor Force buff. So that's 10% increased critical damage, which is going to go really nicely with our increased crit chance rate on this setup. So Barb Trap there for the third ability. Then we have our heal that I was talking about. That's going to be Spirit Guardian. This is actually a heal and a damage reduction effect. So this comes from the Living Death skill line. 16-second heal over time. Does about 4k health every 2 seconds. That does crit quite nicely, though. About 8k regular heals every tick for this guy. Plus the 10% damage reduction. Plus the corpse effect, which we need, by the way. Forgot to talk about that. So corpses are very important for sort of maximizing the efficiency of your Necromancer. Spirit Guardian is going to leave a corpse on the ground. And then our Skeletal Arcanist will also be leaving a corpse on the ground. And we're going to need those actually for our fifth ability, which is Mystic Siphon, an extremely powerful AoE dot and buff. So this is also from Gravelord. That's our last ability here. What does it do? Well, about 30k damage over time, over 12 seconds, to all enemies in the area. We also get some nice recoveries. This is new for the High Isle chapter, 150 health, magicka, and stamina recovery. Also increased damage done, but of course the only thing you need is a corpse on the ground. So as long as you're basically keeping up your Arcanist and your Guardian, you have two choices. You should always have those corpses on the ground, so you should have no problem casting Mystic Siphon. It's free. As long as you have a corpse on the ground, you're good to go. Very powerful ability. Now, finally, the ultimate here is up to you. Now, I've chosen Ice Comet instead of a Necromancer ult. The reason for that, like I sort of mentioned when we talked about the DRAUGR set, is Ice Comet is a really long-lasting dot. This costs 200 ultimate to cast, does some nice upfront frost damage, but then it's doing, 5k plus frost damage every 1 second for 13 seconds. Each of those obviously is getting the buff from DRAUGR, plus our Necromancer bonuses to dots, plus our CP bonuses. Just a really nice long duration dot. Now, that's optional if you don't have, Mage's Guild maxed out. You could use plenty of other things. You could use the Destruction Staff ultimate. That would be a nice option. I think that lasts about 10 or 11 seconds. That probably would be similar in dot damage. You could also really do, if you wanted a Necromancer ultimate that was kind of a damage over time effect, you could try out Ravenous Goliath. You do deal sort of like AoE damage when you're in this form. And this lasts for 20 seconds, but it is much more costly, 250 ultimate. So that's something you might consider as well on this setup. So those are the basic abilities. If you'd like to see alternate skills, if you want to see the full 2-bar setup, make sure to check out the written guide. I'll have a link for that in the description. But with those sort of basics, let's go ahead and talk about the rotation here. Now, the main thing that you'll want to cast as far as buffs, like we said, make sure your potion is up, and then make sure your Spirit Guardian is up, okay? And you're going to want to pre-cast Spirit Guardian because you want that corpse on the ground, right? Now, the thing about these summons, Spirit Guardian and the Skeletal Mage, is you have to have casted them for about 50% of the duration before they make a corpse, right? So here's a corpse. I can use my Mystic Siphon on the corpse and get that extra dot effect. But if I were to, cast my Spirit Guardian and then recast him right away, he doesn't make a corpse. He only makes a corpse if he's out for about, half the time. So that's why I said you want to really precast the Spirit Guardian before taking on any fight, any boss or things like that. Make sure he's down to about 8-9 seconds. Then once you recast him, you get the corpse and you can get the Siphon. So that's just something to keep in mind. Something you'll need to master as you get used to the Necromancer class. So pre-buff your Spirit Guardian, then you'll get into the action here, cast your ultimate if you've got it, and then it's really just laying down all those dot effects, one after the other, and then heavy attacking after all those are down. So let's see how that looks. Go ahead and precast Guardian. I'll go ahead and start with the ultimate, and then the rest of our dots on this world boss. We got everything down, and now I can heavy attack about 3 or 4 times. You can see I procced off balance as well, so my heavy attacks are doing actually more damage on an off balance target. From there, I just have to recast everything one time. Make sure my potion is good. Make sure my target is getting hit by all my dots, my Siphon, everything else. 4 heavy attacks. You can do a couple extra heavy attacks too if you get an off balance proc. Off balance does tons of damage with heavy attacks on the lightning staff. And then just recast everything again. Make sure all those dots are active. And again, about 3 to 4 heavy attacks. I've got an off balance proc coming up soon, so I'm going to make sure all my dots are down. Heavy attack again. I don't even have to target this ad. This is a pretty beefy ad, but my heavy attacks do AoE damage, so shouldn't be a problem for this build at all. You can see I'm barely taking any damage at all. The healing plus the Ice Heart Shield should be more than enough in most cases. There you go. Super easy on the 1-bar Necro setup. Now let's talk about passives for the Necromancer. Necros do have very strong passives, some of the best in the game in my opinion. The main ones you will want from Gravelord, obviously reusable parts. This makes your spirit summons cheaper to cast. Death Knell does give you bonus critical chance. That's very powerful. Dismember gives you bonus penetration, and then Rapid Rot is the main one you'll want here. Increases your damage done with dot effects by 15%. All of our damage on this build is dots, you guys, so make sure you get this one as soon as possible. Then under Bone Tyrant, we're actually not using any of these on the 1-bar setup. So the only one you really will make use of with 1 skill bar is Last Gasp. This gives you 1250 max health. Very recommended, especially for solo content or group content, anything actually. More health is good. And then Living Death, we will get some nice passives from here. We talked about the extra healing that Necros get, sort of to offset the reduced healing that you get from the DRAUGR set now. So with this passive, whenever you get a negative effect, your healing basically equals out, which is really nice. Near Death does give you bonus critical healing, which is powerful on the Necromancer. And then Corpse Consumption for the extra ultimate. Undead Confederate for the extra recovery. Bottom line, get all of these passives. They're very powerful. Of course, you will want your weapon passives, specifically Destruction Staff. Make sure you pick up all of these guys. Light armor passives. Now, I am using 7 pieces of light here, so you do get tons of great passives from light armor. Specifically, Magicka Recovery, Magicka Cost Reduction, Spell Resistance, Critical Chance, and Penetration. So tons of good stats here by running 7 pieces of light. That's kind of the best way I found to maximize the damage of this build, so that is what I would recommend. And then in terms of guild passives, since we are using 1 Fighter's Guild skill, we actually do get a lot from these passives. Intimidating Presence will reduce the cost of Barb Trap. Then Slayer will give you extra spell damage, and Banish the Wicked extra ultimate, as well as some extra damage on the Skilled Tracker passive. So definitely get the first 4, very useful here. Mage's Guild, if you are using the Ice Comet ultimate, you can get some extra Magicka and Magicka Recovery through the Magicka Controller passive. I would recommend maxing that one out. Also, Might of the Guild gives you Empower whenever you use that ultimate as well. So if you follow up that ultimate with a big heavy attack, that's going to do a lot more damage. Finally, make sure you pick up your racial skills and an alchemy medicinal use for the extra potion duration. Let's talk about champion points. There's actually a couple changes that we need to consider for High Isle and setting up this build. I'll go over the main slotted stars, but then to see all the details, make sure to check out the written guide. Over there, we'll have detailed setups for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP. So as far as the green tree, nothing really much has changed here. I'm still running Treasure Hunter, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency, and Steed's Blessing for my slotted stars in green. Blue tree is where we've really seen some changes. So the main thing here is if you look in Extended Might, and again, this is going to be for the High Isle chapter, we have a couple of new things. We have Exploiter returning to the champion point system. This increases your damage done against off-balance targets by up to 10%. Now, since this is running a lightning staff with several lightning skill effects and a shock enchant, we have basically 100% uptime on off-balance even while playing solo. So throwing this on, you do get a slight damage increase. It is pretty nice. Keep in mind too that the other, sort of slotted stars that we might have run, like Biting Aura and Deadly Aim, are actually getting reduced in terms of their effectiveness. Those are now 6% bonuses instead of 10. So the fact that Exploiter is still a 10% bonus does make it more powerful if you can get off balance fairly reliably, which this build can. Now the other one I am running, because again, this is a heavy attack focused build, what you saw, Weapons Expert, this is giving me 15% damage done bonus on those heavy attacks. Remember, heavy attacks are buffed by off balance. So both of these really work well together on this particular setup. So that's 2 slotted stars. The other 2 I have is going to be Thaumaturge, since basically everything we do is a dot. And then Fighting Finesse, since our critical chance is still fairly high. We can get some good increased critical damage and critical healing on this setup. So those are the 4 main damage stars that we've got. Make sure you also pick up Precision for the critical chance. Make sure you pick up Tireless Discipline and Eldritch Insight for the extra stats. And then especially if you're playing solo, Quick Recovery, Preparation, you get lots of damage reduction from these passive stars. Definitely worth it. As far as the red trait, not a whole lot has changed here. I did go with the typical Boundless Vitality for extra health, Fortified for extra armor, Rejuvenation for extra recovery, and then my 4th slotted star is going to be Bastion, since I am using Ice Heart. Most of the time, that's going to give me some extra damage shield on this setup. So there you go. Those are the main CP stars. Again, if you want to see all the details, check out the written guide for the full breakdown at 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP. Last but not least, if you're curious about the outfit style on this character, for armor styles and body pieces, I'm just using what the gear set comes with. So DRAUGR comes in the light armor style. I believe it's called Pyre Watch. Yes, so this style comes from the Unhallowed Grave dungeon. Of course, if you're running DRAUGR, then you will have access to this style already. Right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the Magicka Necromancer 1-bar build for the Elder Scrolls Online. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It is a blast to play, so easy. And hopefully you found this video useful and informative. Of course, if you did, do me a favor, crush that like button. It absolutely helps the channel. Make sure you're subscribed for more build videos for ESO to come. I'll be updating some of my 1-bar builds as well for the High Isle chapter, just like this one, so keep an eye out for those. If you'd like to support the channel further, make sure to check out our YouTube membership. We have 2 tiers currently with some great perks like early access to videos. Our tier 2 members have access to an exclusive video library, tons more great videos over there. So if that sounds good to you and you want to support the channel, click on that join button down below for more information, or you can check out the new Super Thanks feature on YouTube. By clicking the heart button, you can make a one-time donation, get a highlighted comment down below with a guaranteed reply from me. That's another way you can help out the channel. With that said, let me know what you guys think about the build. Are you looking forward to more 1-bar builds for the High Isle chapter? Or if not, what kind of builds would you like to see in the future on this channel? As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.